Lisbon is one of the oldest cities in Europe, older than Paris, older than London, older than Rome even. And it's the only European capital to be built on both a river, the Tagus, and a sea, the Atlantic. This is very much a city that ebbs and flows with the tide and shimmers with the most extraordinary light. It's a light that is trapped and reflected by Lisbon's 7 surrounding hills. It's a light that is mirrored upon the surface of the river. It's a light that bounces off the pale colours of the sandstone buildings of the city. The name Lisbon comes from the word Lisipo, which means enchanted port, and that's exactly how this city feels. This lively Portuguese city is the starting point for our unforgettable Douro with Lisbon and Madrid journey with Scenic. From here, we head north to the charming port city of Porto, where we'll board Scenic Azure to sail along the magnificent Douro Valley. Then we'll wrap it up with a couple of days in the Spanish capital. As Portugal's capital, this colourful city has all the grand monuments and stately cathedrals you'd expect. But this here is its heart, Rocio Square, or Praça do Rocio, as the locals call it. This is Lisbon's main square where the workers come to protest, where buskers come to howl, where tourists come to get fleeced for expensive coffee. The official name of the square is Dom Pedro IV, but it's a name that never stuck. Perhaps it's because the statue there is thought to be of a guy called Maximilian of Mexico, a guy who died at the hands of a firing squad. The Mexicans didn't want a statue of Maximilian, so they sold it at a knockdown price to the Portuguese because Max looked like Dom. Down toward the river is the Hieronymus Monastery, a 500-year-old masterpiece with a history as impressive as its sheer physical size. It took over a century to build, but the chapel itself dates back even further. It was King Manuel who built the church?
Yes, he was the one who sponsored the construction of the church here in Belém.
And there was a reason why it was built right here?
Yes, there's a reason. Here was like a little hermitage that belonged to the military order of Christ, and he was governor, he was great master of that order, and for that reason he chose this spot to build his masterpiece with a kind of a decoration that in Portugal we called Manuelino, from his name.
Right.
Yeah.
King Manuel gave the orders for the monastery's construction to begin at the end of the 1400s, here at the site where seafarers sought refuge and prayed for safe passage during Portugal's Age of Discovery. And we're right next to the river, so this is where the explorers would depart from.
Exactly.
And they would come in here before their voyage.
Yes, it was mandatory for them to stop here on their way to the New World, so they want to ask for protection and then thank God that they arrived safe.
Right. You just cannot underestimate what these guys achieved, really. They opened up Europe to the rest of the world, really, didn't they?
Europe, no, the
Via
world.
The sea.
The known world at the time, exactly, because other people tried to circumnavigate the world, but they never found the passage.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we did. We found a passage from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean.
The monastery not only has an important connection to the empire-building era of which Portugal is rightly proud, it's also uniquely connected to another famed Portuguese creation. It's a creation that simply would not exist were it not for a particular monastic laundry requirement. The Portuguese are known the world over for their great explorers, canned fish, and, well, most importantly, for the creation of these delectable delicacies.
In Portugal, the monks had to use the yolk eggs to do something, to eat. And they invented the custards, with the yolk.
Why did they have the eggs in the first place?
Well, the thing is that they needed the white part of the egg to steep the clothes. So
they used the whites as starch for their costume, right?
Yeah. Right. And so they needed to do something with the rest. And then they started just inventing things, and mostly custard, sweets.
Fortunately for us, those creative monks had the culinary nous to produce what we now know as the Portuguese tart, and what the locals call pastéis de nata. They have a massive kitchen out there. Do you have any idea how many of these they're baking a day?
They do about 6,000 custards a day, more or less.
Wow.
It's a lot.
They are very good. Portugal's capital of Lisbon has developed as an open-air museum of sorts dedicated to the country's domination of the seas and great naval discoveries. The tower was erected here to protect Lisbon from marauding sailors. It was also the beacon that would signal home for returning explorers who had plied the seas, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, crossed the Atlantic. It's also where you'll find the first European stone rendering of a rhinoceros. The story goes that the rhinoceros was sent out from the Portuguese colony in India because King Manuel of Portugal had read that in a fight between a rhinoceros and an elephant, the rhinoceros would win. So, being king, he staged the fight in the grounds of the palace. Now, I know you're going to want to know who won. Well, the elephant was completely disinterested and walked away. Belém Tower is just one of the monumental highlights of Lisbon's Belém district, home to some of the country's most iconic and important tourist sites. After a morning exploring, Scenic will deliver you here to the Maritime Museum, now regarded as one of the most important museums of its type in all of Europe. So this is the result of Henry the Navigator's work, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Actually, it's a very good summary of everything that the Portuguese did in the entire world. We have all the routes heading to India and China and Japan, even to Brazil.
It's an impressive collection of over 17,000 items, from maps to model ships and sailing instruments dating back hundreds of years, and telling the story of Portugal's pioneering role in world exploration. They're very intricate models, aren't they? Brilliant models.
Yes.
Just a few k's outside of Lisbon is Sintra, arguably one of the country's most enchanting towns, chosen as a royal retreat for its beauty and isolation, and now left with a legacy of palaces and regal estates. Sintra is living proof of why it's good to be king. I mean, look at it. It's a fairy tale village of great beauty, chosen by and restricted to royalty and their mates, where the king and queen set up palaces to party away from the minions in this cooler than Lisbon microclimate. And party they did, banquets of great excess, knights in shining armour, fair damsels of buxom righteousness, parades of elephants and peacocks, even the odd wildcat or two. Four-legged, of course. Yes, it was good to be king. As one would expect, Sintra's national palace is palatial, with lavish interiors that remain virtually unchanged since the Middle Ages. This is the room in which the king was caught kissing the most beautiful lady-in-waiting. Word got back to the Queen, Philippa of Lancaster. He had to explain himself. He said his intentions were good. It was for good. He was so enraged at the gossiping among the ladies-in-waiting, of which there were 136, so he painted 136 magpies on the ceiling, magpies being the warbling bird. In their beaks are the words "por bem," meaning for good, and in their claws are the rose being the emblem of the House of Lancaster. It still has all the fascinating detail from 5 centuries ago, including a kitchen that allowed for the preparation of meals for hundreds of guests. This is exactly how you want a European city to look and feel, with a whiff of faded glory and grandeur, a couple of drops of essence of ruin, part medieval, part modern, cathedrals with clanging bell towers, shadowed laneways that hint at past conquests, moss-covered staircases, creaking bridges. It's all here in Porto. It's all clustered upon that hillside and cobblestoned all the way to the banks of the Douro River. Before we set sail on scenic azure on this, our unforgettable Douro adventure, this lively port city beckons us to explore its treasures. The Riviera, literally translated as riverbank, is where it all began, where the crowds continue to flock. Does the whole city revolve around the waterfront, the riverfront?
Yes. Centuries before Christ, when the Romans arrived here and they built a port connecting with Rome, that was the beginning. So the oldest remains of Porto, they are all here.
Then there's Porto's historic centre and its landmark attraction, the Palacio De Bolsa. You'll have to pardon my ignorance, but I've never heard of the royal family of Bolsa, this being the Palacio de Bolsa.
Exactly. Yes, actually it is called a palace, not because a queen or a king have lived in this building, but because this was a big building that was built by the tradesmen of the city to serve them, to honor them.
Oh, so this building was built for the businessmen
For
of
the business.
city.
It's a place where they could trade.
Right, okay, so is that why it's so grand? Because these were guys that were rich and they needed to build something that honoured their status.
Exactly.
As well as the grandest of granite stair masterpieces.
This was also, all of those details, all we see here, this was all hand sculpted by Portuguese artisans. Wow. Just for this staircase, it was needed 40 years of construction.
There's the most intricate of fittings. Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, beautiful chandeliers.
They're unbelievable.
Yeah.
But while each room is impeccably finished and houses a wealth of history and juicy tales, the overwhelming grandiosity of the Arab room is the guaranteed highlight. Oh, my goodness. So this is very...
A neo-Moorish inspired.
I was going to say, the Moorish for sure.
This was a room that was built to impress, to show off. For instance, in this room we have about 20 kilos of gold leaf. So everything that is golden, it is real gold.
Wow, okay. From most vantage points in Porto, you can see the famed Douro, Porto's lifeblood, and indeed the reason for the city's creation. The Douro rises 900 kilometres to the west in Spain. It crosses the Portuguese border and then carves its way through 200 kilometres of arid hillsides and tight valleys to empty into the Atlantic just here at the port of Porto. It's wine country. Well, it's port country to be exact, so named after Portugal's port of Porto, where they would transport port to the port to export to ports of import looking to import port. And it's along the Douro that we'll be travelling on the scenic Azure. Before we set sail again, we take a scenic free choice tour to uncover that rich port history that Cockburn cellars.
You know that the Douro region, it's so unique because it's a single place in the world where you can find and produce this kind of sweet and fortified wine.
Why?
Why? Because you need three things together to have the best grapes. You need the river, the Douro River, you need the mountains, and you need the ground, that special stone, the schist. And combined together, they make the perfect grapes for this amazing wine.
Cockburn's holds one of the greatest collections of oak barrels and wooden vats of any port cellar in the world, with seasoned and aged oak at the heart of its premium port production. But as always, the proof is in the port glass itself.
So this is a 20 years.
This is the 20?
Yes, this is a 20, and the average of the blend is 20 years.
Right,
okay?
This is syrupy and...
Yeah. It's a perfect wine, isn't it?
Wow. I'll take 10 of each.
Okay.
Today's stop is Guimarães, considered the birthplace of Portugal because Afonso Henrique, the first king of the country, was born here. The town's two main drawcards are its 1,000-year-old castle and the Ducal Palace, originally built as a manor house for the dukes of the time. Whoa. banquet room?
Banquet room. That used to be all banquets and feasts.
Yeah. And you get a lot of people in here, don't you? It's
Yes.
a lot of lunch at that table. And that's an amazing ceiling. That's like the hull of a boat.
A boat, yes. The boat builders used to make these ceilings.
Another massive room.
Exactly. You see the holes over there, next to the fireplace on the top. They were from the Duke chamber, so we'll be able to see everything from what's going on this room. So they knew everything about who's going to date who or something like that.
They're spying
right
on
here, they're spying here. So, and when it was crowded, they come down to say hello to everybody. They know everything.
Oh, okay. So the first Duke of Portugal was a voyeur.
It was the first Facebook.
We needn't be envious, as our own palatial hotel on the water, the luxurious scenic Azure, is ready, waiting to glide us towards the next port of call. Of all the hotel beds I've collapsed upon over the years, I doubt there's been one quite as sublime as this. I mean, this is a bed of pure genius. Not only does this remote offer the ability to manipulate and invert yourself into positions you never thought imaginable, the bed provides such a level of tranquility and contentment. The Zs descend like a torrent. You're out like a light in seconds. I mean, I have been sleeping the sleep of an all-conquering warrior. Like a hibernating grizzly with nothing left to grizzle about. It's like a feather on fleece. If you can peel yourself away from the magnificence of scenic Azure for just an hour or two, the Douro Museum is just across the road from our docking point in Reyne. Where we are now, Reyne, is this pretty much the beginning of the wine area?
Yes, we are quite in the beginning of what we call the wine country. Coming from Porto, this is where we actually enter the World Heritage Site, more or less. So it's the World Heritage Site by UNESCO has around 10% of all the area where we can make port, and it's the most representative of the hard work of men building all these huge terraces and planting the vines and the wine estates and the railway. It's all part of this area that we need to preserve because it's very unique. Yeah, so we decided to dedicate the upper floor all to the wine, which is our #1 product, and especially to port. But here in this wall, for example, we want to show our visitors that the region is not just about port. And so we decided to have here all these different kinds of wines. So we have the table wines, we have different ports like the tawnies, the rubies, the white ports, we have some late harvest, even sparkling wines. We are making excellent sparkling wines in the door, so we decided to show it to our visitors.
If there's one thing that's immediately evident about Portugal, it's that this is a quietly proud country with so much to crow about, with their history of discovery and exploration, with the subsequent enormous wealth, with their gentle but magnificent influence around the globe. Any other nation would be strutting about with their chest puffed out, bashing your ear. Not here, not the Portuguese. It's almost as if they're apologetic for all they've achieved. They're proud and they're passionate, but they're mellow and they're modest. I mean, what's not to like? And then there's their port. Any country that is able to create a drink that has the effect of an angel fluffing her wings and batting her eyelashes upon your tongue has certainly got it sorted. And there's still plenty of Portugal and the Douro yet to discover.